Alright, so I got a lot of requests for this video. It's going to be a tier list of red flags. Now, there's a couple disclaimers I want to make before I continue. The main assumption for this tier list is that you're looking for a girl that's long-term worthy. This list will be subject to change. If you have any suggestions, feel free to let me know in the comments. S tier is the strongest red flag, and D tier is the weakest red flag. Let's get started. The first one is wants to check your phone all the time. This one's pretty bad because it leads to a whole lot of control. It's going to be very hard for you to maintain that masculine frame you need to maintain long-term attraction. If she's constantly anxious about who you're talking to, it probably means that she doesn't trust you that much. For this reason, we're actually going to put this in S tier. No girl I ever date is going to have access to my phone. That's just ridiculous. I'm looking for a partner, not a supervisor or a mother. Now, of course, a lot of people are going to ask, oh, but is it equal in reverse? And the truth is, no, it's not. Your girl shouldn't be able to have access to your phone, but you should be able to have access to hers whenever you want. A lot of people are going to cry about this, but this is the nature of being dominant and being submissive. Now, to clarify, for being completely realistic, you shouldn't be checking her phone all the time either. If you're constantly asking her to look at her phone because you're scared, it'll just look like you're weak. You should be able to read from her behavior if she's into you anymore or not. So checking through her phone is purely when you know 100% that there's somebody else and you just want to confirm it. I don't really recommend this anyways. Most of the time it backfires. Types in all lowercase. This one's really not that heavy. I guess a lot of people are going to say it indicates how good she is at language or whatever. I have noticed that girls that are educated are more likely to do proper sentences, but I mean, texting is supposed to be casual, so it's not really that hardcore of an indicator. For that reason, I'm going to put it into D tier. Makes you cut off your friends. Okay, this is absolutely S tier. This one actually is probably even higher than the other one, so I'm going to put it at the top of S tier for now. For girls trying to control you by making you cut off your friends, you have a big problem. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with this, but you as a guy, you need your guy friends. They're the only people that can be in your life from a pure perspective without some sort of crazy vested interest. A girl's happiness with you is always going to be tied to your financial status, how you're doing, your happiness levels. With guy friends, it doesn't really work this way. The moment she tries to make you cut off friends, maybe she's trying to control you so she can completely control the narrative. If you let her do this, you're the problem. This is a massive red flag, guys. You should really not overlook this one. Car fanatic is quite interesting because I think in a lot of ways it sort of demonstrates something about her personality. The car hobby in general is a masculine hobby, and it's not to say that girls can't engage in this hobby, but what I have noticed is most of the time, girls that get into the car scene are usually pick-me girls, otherwise known as tire biters. That being said, I don't think it's quite S tier, but I will put it in A tier. The main reason I'm putting it in A tier is because a car fanatic is a bit of a spectrum. A girl might buy a bubble car like an Audi TT and call herself a car fanatic. Most of the time, that type of girl is not the one that's going to go to the local car meet and show off her car. When I think of a car fanatic, I think of a person that goes to a car meet and shows their car off with everybody else. This is the type of girl that's an A tier red flag. The next one is compares you with her ex. So I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. Every girl ever is always going to compare you to her ex. It's just that some are outwardly about it and some are going to be very covert about it, meaning they're not going to tell you directly what they're thinking. For the sake of this video, I'm going to assume that comparing you with her ex means overt. So she's telling you directly about how you don't match up to her ex. Honestly, for this one, I'm going to put this at the top of S tier, because if she's comparing you to her ex, it means that she likely hasn't gone over him. Making you cut off your friends is pretty bad. Wanting to check your phone all the time is pretty bad from a control perspective, but nothing is worse than having an ex on her mind that she can't get over. This is a really, really bad red flag, guys. And if she does this, she really doesn't respect you that much. Get out as soon as possible. All right, always responds with, I don't care. This one can go both ways, guys, because there is the case of a submissive girl that really likes to do anything with you and she really doesn't care. There's also the case of the girl that's not very engaged. I think that might be what this is going for, but even then it's still not that heavy. I guess you just have to read the situation a little bit. If you're already at that point where she doesn't care about anything you're doing, probably time to move on. I'm going to assume that this one right here is when you ask a girl what she wants to do and she says, I don't care. The truth is though, you really shouldn't be asking her what to do that often regardless. For that reason, I'm going to put this in D tier. This one you have to interpret a little bit because it's not extremely clear, but I sort of gave my reasoning anyway. All right, so dresses for more than your eyes. This one's pretty bad. I'm going to put this in S tier. Second, after comparing with your ex, if she's actively recruiting while she's with you, you are just temporary. At this point, this is obviously a lack of respect, and you won't really get anywhere in this relationship for the long term. If she's doing this, I would not bother. Move on immediately. All right, overly quirky. This one's a bit weird because me personally, it's not really my thing. So I'd probably put this in B or A, but I think these days a lot of guys like overly quirky girls. So for that reason, I'm probably going to settle on C tier for now. I might change that one. I think C tier is a pretty good place. Just because she's overly quirky doesn't mean she'll be a bad long-term partner. Maybe she's a bit socially awkward or extremely nerdy, dorky, whatever it is. This list is obviously based on long-term partner potential. Being overly quirky doesn't really affect that, so I'm going to put it into C tier. TikTok user. So I'm going to be honest, guys. Pretty much everyone's on TikTok. You're not going to be able to escape this. So for that reason, I'm going to put this in D tier. Sure, you can call it a red flag all you want. Maybe it is. Everybody's doom scrolling all the time now. So if you base your decision on dating someone, whether or not they're a TikTok user, you're probably not going to have anyone left to date, honestly. It is what it is. I don't love the reality of it, but it's how it goes, so I'm going to put it into D tier. Always needs new iPhone. I mean, sure, we can call it a bit materialistic. I mean, the last few iPhones have been more or less the same. It could indicate that she wants the newest thing, but then again, who doesn't? I guess the key word here is needs the new iPhone, not wants. Everybody wants it. She always needs a new iPhone. There's probably a touch of entitlement behind that, so for that reason, I'm going to put this in B tier. Girls that are entitled to things are very hard to date long term. Even if you buy them the new thing, they're always going to want to buy the new thing, even if it's a total waste of money just for the sake of it being new. For this reason, your upkeep is going to be extremely high on this type of woman, and even if you have millions of dollars, at some point you have to consider the principle of it. Just because you have millions of dollars doesn't mean you should spend on something that's not worth spending on. At the same time, there's definitely worse red flags than this, and I'll be honest, if the girl's pretty enough, there's going to be a lot of guys that are going to be willing to pay this price. For that reason, I'll put it in B tier. Excessive jealousy. This one's a bit interesting because, let's be honest, if your girl isn't a little bit jealous, she probably doesn't like you that much. When girls really like a guy, they think that every other girl in the world likes them as well. The main reason for this is because every girl on earth thinks she's special in some way. Because she's special and likes you, every other girl in the world must also, by default, like you. It's a bit of a self-importance thing, for being honest. Once we get into the excessive territory, it becomes a lot to deal with, especially if it's going on all the time. I know a lot of guys experience this. They're in a restaurant, some girl says something nice to you, now your girl repeats that line over and over. To me, it's already getting into that excessive territory because that small little thing is affecting her that much when really you didn't do anything. This is a lot of emotions for you to deal with, so if you can't deal with this correctly, it can definitely create a problem for a long-term relationship. For that reason, I'm probably going to put this into A tier, and I'm going to put it above Car Fanatic. Spends too much money. This is a little bit similar to the iPhone, but at least with the iPhone, it's only specific to that. But the idea is very similar, but now we're talking about in general. So if a girl spends too much money, it will always be a headache for you and you're never going to be able to curb it. Once again, right? Even if you are a millionaire and you have tons of disposable income, it doesn't mean that a girl should just be spending it just because you have it. If she spends too much of her own money, she will guaranteed spend too much of your money. It's always easier to spend someone else's money than our own money, of course. For this reason, I'm going to legitimately put this in S tier. It's definitely not the top of S tier. Having a lack of respect is always going to be much worse than spending too much money. Spending too much money has nothing to do with you directly, but eventually it will affect you long term. For that reason, I'll put it at the bottom of S tier for now. Botox, fillers, surgery. So this one's a bit of an interesting one. I guess for this one, it really depends on how excessive it is. If she's using these things to completely change what she looks like to the point that she's unrecognizable, I think it could create a problem because now you're attracted to someone who doesn't actually look like that. The obvious long-term consequence is your child is not going to look like her. It's going to look like the version of her before she got all the surgeries done. When girls are extremely feminine, they also tend to be very vain. That vanity leads them to want to exploit the system if they can. The other thing to consider is that it doesn't directly affect you unless you're the one that's paying for it. Most of the time though, girls that are into Botox, fillers, or surgery, they usually go for guys that have a lot of money because they want to be supported in that way, because generally speaking, they're quite feminine. For this reason, even though I tend to not love it, I'm going to put it into B tier. I feel like this one's going to be controversial to be in B tier, but it is what it is. I'll leave it there for now and I'll think about it a little bit more. All right, so this one is always fun. OnlyFans account. Okay, so OnlyFans account immediately goes to the top. If a girl's crossed that mental boundary where she's now comfortable selling sexuality on the internet, it's pretty much impossible to have a proper long-term relationship with her. Obviously, a lot of girls are going to cope with this saying, oh, work is work and who I am personally is different. They try to dissociate these two personalities to try to pretend that they can play both games. But the reality is, it just doesn't work this way. As a man, obviously, all men are going to want a girl's femininity and sexuality purely to themselves, not to be shared with everybody else. If everybody has it, it's not that valuable. The other issue is, if she is extremely attractive and makes a lot of money off of it, her whole perception of life is completely skewed. How can she possibly respect hard work when all she has to do is go on the internet and make a ton of money by just showing herself? There's a tiny fraction of guys that can date girls like this and maybe make it last some period of time. To be honest though, I think it's almost impossible for a man of quality to grow old with an OnlyFans girl. I just don't see this being a realistic thing. Sure, there probably is some spineless guys out there that will date them and take them seriously for some period of time, but eventually it's going to eat them alive and they won't be able to handle it anymore. It's shocking to me how many people even try to debate this as if it isn't the most obvious thing on earth. It goes completely against their animal instinct. So obviously it's going to be a huge problem for guys, and the fact that girls try to sell it so hard is such extreme cope, but I'll leave it at that. Top of S tier. If you guys liked the video so far, don't forget to hit the like button. Gaslighting. All right, so this one, gaslighting is tough because I think a lot of girls, not all in this case, I would say there's a fairly large subsect of girls that will do this when they don't get their way. They're going to turn to you, shame, guilt, whatever, when they don't get their way. And I think that as a guy, it's really important that you become resistant to these things. That being said, even if you are really resistant to gaslighting and you can manage it every single time, it takes a lot of energy because now you're going to be baited into some sort of an argument. Anytime a girl is trying to manipulate the frame of the situation to give her the benefit over you, it will create problems long term because now she's not being submissive. Instead, she's trying to manipulate the situation to give her the greatest benefit. As I said, there's a large subsect of women, especially the attractive ones, that will do this in some form. That being said, I'm going to put this in A tier. The main reason I'm putting it here is that most guys honestly can't handle it correctly, so this will cause problems in your relationship, and from a long-term perspective, you have to be a bit of a stubborn animal to deal with this, and these days most guys aren't, so they will fall victim to this. Loud chewing. This is one of those decorum things. I really don't like it when girls don't have that basic level of understanding to act a certain way in public. The thing with this one though, does it really affect a long-term relationship that much? I mean, it just comes down to your tolerance, but it doesn't directly affect you in a negative way. If she's a good person and this is just one of those things that she just does, I mean, it may be worth tolerating for you, right? For that reason, I'm going to put it in D tier. Constantly tries to take pictures of you. I don't really understand this one. I mean, if she likes you that much, she's going to want to take pictures of you. I'd argue it's a pretty good thing. I mean, I don't really see how taking pictures of you is a control thing unless she always wants you to post her on social media. In this case, it doesn't say that, so I'm going to go with she's just trying to take pictures of you. I would personally respond positively to this because it means that she really likes you. For that reason, I don't think it's that heavy of a red flag. I'm going to put this in D tier. Septum piercing. All right. So with septum piercing, I mean, what really is it? It's a rebellion of some sort. Most girls won't do a septum piercing, obviously. The ones that do, they generally do it for some sort of rebellious purpose, whether they want to admit it to themselves or not. It's the same with girls that get tons of piercings all over their ears and stuff, is they're trying to rebel in some way, and this is one of the forms that takes. Girls that rebel and want to fight, they tend to be more masculine, and if they're more masculine, it's harder to maintain them in a long-term relationship. Is it possible to maintain them? I mean, of course it is. Guys do it, but if we're talking about ideal long-term relationship, the septum piercing could indicate a bit of a rebellious masculine nature. You're gonna have a harder time managing that. I'm going to put this into A tier. A lot of people probably would debate the septum piercing versus the Botox filler, but the key here is feminine, masculine. Septum piercing is masculine. Botox fillers and surgery, it's a feminine expression most of the time. All right, tattoos. So tattoos are very similar to the septum piercing. Once again, it indicates a potentially masculine nature. I will say though, these days it's becoming less and less the case. Getting tattoos now isn't as rebellious as it was 10, 15, or 20 years ago. If anything, now it's becoming more of a mainstream thing. For that reason, it's not always clear if it is a masculine expression or not, but I'm still going to assume that many times it is. For that reason, I'm going to put it slightly ahead of septum piercing because it's way harder to reverse a tattoo than a septum piercing. Tattoos are always a very controversial one just because everybody has them now. Like I said, you have to use a little bit of discernment with this. I do know a number of girls that have a few tattoos, like little ones on their arm or on their leg or whatever. It's not the most defining thing, but something you want to pay attention to and look deeper. Like with most of these things, guys, just because you see this, it's not an automatic cross off. I would say S tier on this list probably is. I mean, it wants to check your phone all the time. You could probably manage it, but you get the point, right? S tier is getting very close to auto cutoff. A little bit less, and then D is not conclusive, right? That's the whole idea here. All right, single mom. This one gets a lot of attention online for sure. And I think it depends which community you're looking at. Of course, I'm talking to guys. This tier list is for guys, so I'm not going to be that touchy about the emotional side of things, which obviously everybody wants to introduce emotions and make it all about the character of the person, even though someone else has to pay for it. A lot of people don't want to accept that reality that somebody always has to pay the price for something else. The fact that people feel entitled to it is my issue here. There's nothing inherently wrong with a single mother, but if she's out here pretending that she deserves the world, I think it gets into a little bit controversial territory at some point we have to come to reality and understand that having a child is definitely going to have implications on someone coming into that scenario. For this reason, I'm going to put it into S tier. Even if the single mom is an absolute angel, you will have to deal with the reality of the child at some point. Whether that means less time for you, whether that means you taking responsibility partially of someone else's child, there's probably going to be some sort of drama from it, right? Because you can't have authority of the child, but you're going to be expected in some way to provide for the child. So it gets really, really complicated very, very quickly. Of course, there's always the high probability that that father now, the other man, will always be in the woman's life in some form. That's something that you're going to have to deal with in some way. It's an unflattering truth, but it is what it is. Even if the woman herself is a very good woman, you're going to have some sort of pushback from this, which is why it's going to be an S tier. If there's an S minus, I'd probably put an S minus only because OnlyFans is much more egregious than having a child. But at the same time, it will make your life much, much more difficult, even if she's really good. So something you have to consider. Too much makeup. So this one falls into a very similar spectrum as Botox filler surgery. This is all part of this vanity thing. It's not always specific to girls that are less attractive and more attractive. It's girls that are extremely vain and want to look as perfect as possible. For this reason, I'm going to put it under Botox and filler only because it's temporary and not permanent or semi-permanent. Can't cook. So this one is extremely common now. A huge percentage of girls don't cook anymore. I think the whole idea of cooking isn't so much about cooking quality food. It's supposed to be a submissive act. It's supposed to be one of those things that a girl does for you that saves you time and makes you feel like she's taking care of you. A lot of girls get really mad about this because they always say, oh, if we have money, why don't we order takeout? It's not about the takeout. It's about the principle, of course. Not to mention the fact that home cooked food is usually way healthier than takeout food anyway. It's a bit of a tough one, but because it's not permanent, it's pretty easy to learn how to cook. So I'm going to leave it at C tier for now. Does not clean up after herself. This one right here is pretty bad because it sort of shows that everything was done for her whole life. Women that don't have any sense of decency when it comes to this or any sense of responsibility, they typically aren't that great people, and most of the time they're going to be a massive headache in a long-term relationship. Surprisingly, I'm probably going to put this in A tier, and I'm even going to put it ahead of tattoos. I think a number of years ago, I probably wouldn't have ranked it this way, but currently, in 2024, I think this does not clean up after herself, needs to be looked at much more carefully than people expect. Extremely indecisive. Okay, so let's be honest, guys. Very feminine women are always indecisive. They always have a lot of anxiety around the decision making of things because they don't want to be wrong about things. This is just the nature of the feminine. For this reason, this is definitely going to be in D tier. This is not something that should bother you as a guy unless you're very, very feminine and completely out of touch with what your role is. No motivation in life. Absolutely no motivation in life is a bit dangerous. I think the issue with this is that motivation in life is always seen through the masculine lens, which is through career, achievement, and all these things. I think there is feminine motivation too, like the motivation to have a family and have children, all those things. I think there are different types of motivation. So for her to have zero motivation in life is a bit dangerous. This one's a little bit tough for sure. I'm probably going to put this on the top of A tier. If you don't have a strong enough reason to do something, you're likely not to do it. This could apply to anything, of course. So I think it's pretty important. I'm going to put it top of A tier. One of the guys. Okay, this one's really interesting as well. A lot of times they are more masculine. When girls are one of the guys, they obviously tend to hang around guys a lot more. It sort of gives them the same vibe as a car fanatic. The girl likely doesn't hang out with girls because she thinks that she's an alpha female, but at the same time, she's probably a little bit of a pick-me, drinks beer, stuff like this. I'm gonna put this in A tier. All these are a bit tough. This one's a little bit up for interpretation, I would say. Trust issues. Pretty typical of girls that have been hurt in the past and can't let go, obviously. When it comes to a long-term relationship, of course, if a girl has these types of trust issues, it's going to be a problem for you, and you're always going to be the one to have to manage it, and you're always going to be the one who's responsible when it doesn't work out. For this reason, I'm going to put it up beside excessive jealousy. I'm going to put it right behind, though, in A tier. Controlling. So I'm going to put controlling in S tier. The main reason I'm going to put this in S tier is because the need to control is typically a masculine need. The masculine likes to be in control of its destiny. The feminine is more oriented towards chaos, the unknown, the whatever happens, happens sort of mentality. Nothing will put more pressure on you as a guy long-term than a girl that's constantly trying to control what you do. You can probably tolerate it for a little bit, but eventually it's going to wear you down to the point that you submit or that you leave. Don't let this one slide, especially early on. If you do, you're going to be in trouble, and the long-term potential of that relationship is going to basically go to shit. Very secretive. Very secretive is a bit context dependent. Like if it's early on, it kind of makes sense, right? But the truth is this: when a girl's submissive to you and really likes you, she pretty much becomes an open book to you. Sometimes it's too annoying because they tell you things that you don't want to hear, but this is sort of the nature of how they function. They want to be able to tell you whatever comes to their mind. That's how they become more comfortable around you. If they're still extremely secretive, even after a long time has passed, I think there's something they're obviously trying to hide, or it goes into the controlling thing where they're really trying to control the frame of the relationship. It's one tick down from controlling, so I'm going to put it in A tier. Doesn't respect boundaries. I mean, at this point, you don't have any respect from this woman. If you tell her don't do that and she doesn't care, that relationship is over. For that reason, S tier for sure. Even early on, right? If you try to put some sort of boundary and she doesn't accept that boundary, doesn't care, you have no chance in that relationship, guys. Walk away. I'm actually going to put this a little bit higher. It's pretty competitive with Dresses for More Than Your Eyes. I'm just going to put it above. Doesn't like when you're with friends. It's that common idea that girls hate it when you're having fun. It does go into the control thing, of course, because as soon as a girl cares that much when you're having fun with your friends, it means that she feels that she's exclusively entitled to all of your time. This one's akin to controlling, of course, but it's a little bit more niche or specific, so I'm going to put it underneath trust issues. Only has male friends. This one's pretty much the same as one of the guys, honestly. It's almost indistinguishable. For that reason, I'm going to put it right above because it is very specific. Constantly puts you down. This is very similar to controlling. It doesn't respect boundaries, so I'm going to put this right behind. Doesn't respect boundaries because it's a little bit more specific. Doesn't take interest in your hobbies. So I'll be honest, guys, girls and guys have different hobbies. Most of the time, girls aren't going to take that much interest in your hobbies. Now, I understand if you guys have some mutual hobbies like hiking or whatever it may be. Let's be real about this. The overwhelming majority of the time, your girl isn't going to help you fix your car, and you're not going to sit there and knit or sew or whatever with her. I don't think it's that crazy of a concept. I think people that really think that you have to do everything with your partner, it turns into a best friend relationship, which fair enough. Some people can make that work because they don't require a high amount of passion. But if they require a certain amount of passion, this becomes less important because you want more of that duality instead of almost being the same. I'm going to put this in C tier. Daddy issues. Okay, so daddy issues extremely common, guys. One huge misconception about daddy issues is always that the dad must not be present or hyper abusive for the girl to have daddy issues. There is girls that have a present father that is a total pushover that have daddy issues. This daddy issues thing is so prevalent. I swear, like the majority of women have daddy issues of some sort. Now, some of them might resolve them eventually, but it's a catch-all term now. And I think before it was always referring to some insane abusive thing. So I guess it depends on how you define this. I'm probably going to put this in B tier. Germophobia. This is annoying to deal with sometimes, but at least it indicates some standard of cleanliness. So for that reason, I'm going to put this in D tier. Opposite culture. I guess if we're talking about like a right-wing person and a left-wing person, shockingly, of course, it works out pretty well because there's that balance of femininity, masculinity that correlates with each side, of course. I'm talking about conservative man, liberal woman. When it's reversed, it definitely doesn't work. So opposite culture, I think if you're valuable enough and attractive enough, I really don't think that that matters. I think that she will acquiesce on some level. There are some cases where culturally speaking, it's very, very divided and the mentality towards a certain topic can be different. So yeah, this one's tough to rank. I'm gonna put it in B tier. No oral. This one's quite funny. So I mean, from a long-term perspective, right? You do want to have a little bit of spice. Now, these days, everyone's so hyper perverted, I guess, right? Because of pornography and whatnot. It's pretty rare for this to be the case. If she doesn't, yeah, I mean, it could be dry. But does that really affect your long-term relationship potential? Not from a standard perspective anyway, right? I mean, sure, you might want that, but does that mean that she's not a good girl? Does that mean that she's not going to do things for you? Does that mean she's not going to take care of you? Not necessarily. I do think there might be a little bit of correlation to submission there, for sure. There probably is. Obviously, all the guys want to put it top of S tier, but I'm going to be reasonable about this. I'm going to put this in, it's tough. I'll put it in C tier. Ratchet friends, birds of a feather flock together. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. For that reason, Ratchet friends, pretty high up there. I'm going to put it up in A tier, high A tier. But this one could be S tier. I can't have everything in S tier, you know what I mean? That's why it's tough. I want to have at least some sort of dividing line. But I am very close. I'm very close to putting this in S tier. No, the more I think about this, it does belong in S tier. We're going to put this right here. Ratchet friends are going to encourage her to do all kinds of things, and maybe she won't cave initially, but if there's any sort of pressure on the relationship, they're going to be doubling down on that pressure, and it's just going to create a lot of problems for you long term. So yes, I will put that in S tier. The more I think about it, the more it makes sense there. Illiterate. I mean, from a dynamics perspective, it doesn't matter too much, but at the same time, though, you probably should go for women that have some sort of knowledge, education, not totally stupid. So illiterate probably should go in A tier. The problem is, though, is that being illiterate doesn't indicate her character. This is my issue with this, because we're talking about long term, right? Yeah, I mean, B tier. Frequent contact with X. So this here is very similar to can't get over her ex. This is a different manifestation of not being able to get over her ex most of the time. Is there caveats to this and exceptions? There is, but let's be honest, most of the time, this isn't the case. Okay. So for that reason, I'm going to put this behind doesn't respect boundaries in S tier. Excessive partying, S tier. Worse than controlling, honestly. Just opens the door to so much drama and problems. Yeah. Designer branded clothing only. It's a vanity thing, as we said before. It's the same thing as spending money. I'm going to put it into that category. The more I think about it, though, it's a little bit tough here because it is an example of spending too much money. It has to be in the same realm as Botox, fillers, surgery, but obviously temporary or not permanent, I should say. So I'll put it here. I think the main difference between designer branded clothing only and spending too much money is that this is so general. Spending too much money means spending more than you should relative to how much you have, right? Whereas if she has money from whatever source and she's wearing branded clothing only, I mean, so be it. Yeah, it's sort of similar, but if it's within her means, I don't see it as much of an issue, right? I mean, you want a girl to care what she looks like, right? So it's a bit counterintuitive if I say, oh yeah, I want her to care what she looks like, but then I have a problem with her wearing designer clothes. It's sort of pick your poison, guys. You can't really have it all. So for that reason, I'm going to put it here. Unnaturally dyed hair. This one is in the same lane as tattoos and septum piercing. It's less permanent, so I'm going to put it underneath. But it's the same spectrum, guys. It's some sort of rebellion statement. Now, I know a lot of you guys see girls online with the pink hair or whatever, and you go crazy over that, thinking that she's crazy, which, hey, whatever. We could say the same logic for tattoos and septum piercing. So at least hair color can go back to normal. Piercings, same thing, less specific, higher than septum because that's very specific, where piercings could be everywhere. Ungroomed. Ungroomed isn't good. You see how you have two ends of the spectrum here? You could say, oh, Botox, too much makeup is on one end. Ungroomed is on the other, but to me, from a perspective of masculine and feminine, I'd argue it's way more detrimental to be with a girl that's ungroomed consistently than a girl that's overly put together. You want a girl to care about what she looks like, right? If a girl doesn't care what she looks like, she's probably gonna be a little bit more masculine. And is that really what you want from a long-term partner? Probably not. At least if you want to stay attracted to her, right? So I'm gonna put this in A tier, probably put it right here. Doesn't wear heels. Heels are great, but is it really a deal breaker? Is it really going to affect your long-term relationship? I mean, probably not. There's lots of other shoes that still look good. It sort of reminds me of No Oral. It's like this random thing. I mean, it's nice. It's a really nice bonus, but is it really going to grind down your relationship? Probably not. Addicted to coffee. I mean, it's pretty light. As long as it's just coffee and not indicative of some sort of a addictive personality. But yeah, I'm going to put this in C tier. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but it could be. Yeah, let's leave it in C tier. Hard drugs. Hard drugs usually assumes that they're doing it consistently and often. I'm going to put this quite high in S tier. It's a different category of S tier. It doesn't necessarily go around disrespect, but it's something you can't really deal with because it creates so much instability. It's sort of in the excessive partying. I'm going to put it above, though, because it's more specific. Twitch streamer. This one's quite interesting. I'm going to put this in A tier. My main reason for this is because girls that get a lot of attention online, it tends to inflate their sense of worth to the point that they believe that they are better than they are. The issue is she's going to take that on you as the guy, and if you're not up to par, she will always feel that she has this massive abundance of value. That can be very annoying to deal with from a long-term relationship perspective, because if you try to maintain some sort of boundary, it's very easy for her to cross that boundary and think she's better than she is because of this. So, Twitch streamer, TikTok streamer, any of these things, sort of in the same ballpark. They're very difficult to maintain for long-term relationships. Always plays the victim. I mean, this is dangerous. This is the same as gaslighting, pretty much. So for that reason, I'm gonna put this below, but they're very similar. Physically aggressive, I mean, dangerous, out of line. It puts you in a really tough position. Kind of falls in the realm of controlling. I'm gonna put S tier. Frequently cursing, non-ideal, more ladylike when they're not constantly swearing for sure. But at the same time, is it the absolute end of the world? I mean, not necessarily. I'm gonna put this in high B tier. Ratchet accent. I'm gonna put this in B tier, under illiterate. Communication issues. I mean, is there very many women that are gonna say exactly the truth without some sort of a filter? Is there a lot of girls that are gonna perceive their own emotions correctly? I mean, most girls are really, really bad at communication, and for some reason, no one wants to talk about that. That's the nature of being emotional. Emotions a lot of times are irrational. If they're irrational, they're hard to describe. So most girls are going to have communication issues. I'm just going to be honest about it. So I'm going to put this in C tier. Overweight, doesn't care about her appearance. It's in the same vein as ungroomed. So obviously A tier. Frequently depressed. This one's tough, right? Because now if she has some sort of emotional trauma or issues, you're going to be the one that's going to have to deal with that. It's not necessarily an auto deal breaker for me, for sure. I don't think it's something that can't be resolved, but you have to be careful about it. It's at least A tier. Yeah, I'll put it in this category. Unnaturally dyed hair and frequently depressed. They tend to go hand in hand, if you know what I mean. Doesn't work, no income. I mean, as a man, I think a lot of guys have the goal. If they were to choose their ideal relationship, they probably would prefer to be able to take care of a woman. I think that is the ideal outside of the new modern programming. I know a lot of guys, they buy into the 50-50, but I think they do that because they are inherently lazy. They don't have that same drive, or they want to take care the same way. For that reason, outside of that fantasy, I don't really see it as a problem. I think if you're watching my content, you really shouldn't see it as a problem. I understand if you're young, you don't have an income, and you're not doing anything but sitting at home all day. I get that. You know, I get that, how that can be seen as an issue for sure early on, but inevitably you're going to want to transition them if you want the ideal situation. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in D tier. Disrespect waitresses, lack of respect, lack of decorum, entitled behavior, not very good. I will put this, yeah, it's definitely an A tier. It's tough though, it's tough. I'll put it right here between trust issues, doesn't like when you're with friends. Only has crazy exes. Well, this means she has a particular type of appetite, if you know what I'm trying to say. So for that reason, if she only has crazy exes, it likely means that that's what she's attracted to, obviously. And if you're the exception, you got to be a little bit aware, a little bit careful of that. Patterns tend to repeat themselves, obviously, and to assume that people are going to change and grow isn't necessarily the safe thing to do. Some people do. They can grow past their problems and whatnot. So to say it never happens isn't true. To expect that to be the standard case and to always give an exception for it, I don't think it's smart. For that reason, I do think it's a red flag, but I guess it depends on what crazy means. A lot of girls are going to say a guy is really, really crazy, but that's because they're interpreting it that way or framing it that way. Is he that crazy or not is tough to know for sure. So if crazy was defined, it probably would be S tier, but for that reason, I'm going to put it into A tier, high A tier. They're smoking cigarettes all the time. It's not really the most feminine thing. I'm not a huge fan. Is it an S tier? I mean, probably not. I wouldn't classify the same as hard drugs, but I do put it in A tier. It's somewhere in the rebellion camp, tattoo, smoking, piercings. I'm actually going to put it above these. Does not clean after herself. Yeah, I'm going to put it right here. That makes sense. Anime weebtard. I mean, whatever. It's her hobby. It's what she likes. Is it a bit dorky? Yes, but I sort of consider it the same as overly quirky. It's in this category. I'll put it here. Gamer girl, same thing. Same niche of girl right there. Friends fan. Honestly, this is not really that much of a red flag. It's just you say it's basic, but I'm going to put it here. D tier. Starbucks hipster. I mean, we're going to go into the category. I mean, there's two ways of looking at this. We can look at it as unnaturally dyed hair category, which I don't think it's that excessive. I really don't. I think it's sort of a style. So, nah, it's got to be in the. It's got to be in the gamer girl, quirky section. Netflix binger. It's a type of a hobby again. I mean, is it really that different than a gamer girl? No. Most girls have binged Netflix in their life. Whatever. C tier. Attraction to drug dealers. This is the crazy X thing. It's an attraction to a very specific type of guy, a wild guy probably, breaks the rules. It's definitely A tier. I'm going to put it right beside, has only crazy X's. In and out of relationships. She can maintain relationships very well. It's going to be a problem. I mean, girls are supposed to be inclined to having long-term relationships. So having a couple boyfriends isn't necessarily the end of the world. Having 20 boyfriends a year is definitely indicative of something. So I'm definitely going to put this in A tier. Right there. Astrology believer. If you're against this, you're screwed. Most of them believe in astrology, okay? Honestly, it really does fall in the same category as these other things. I'm gonna put it top of C tier. Disrespects parents. I guess the reasoning matters, but if she's not submissive, it gets into that masculine camp again. So it's rebellion. That rebellion goes into the same category as piercing, septum piercing, all these things. I'm going to put this right here. Choice of alcohol is beer. Talked about this. One of the guys, I mean, it's not always the case that's like this, so it's not as specific. That's why I'm going to put this in B tier. Probably in the ratchet accents or in the similar area. Part of a sorority, huge subsect of girls do this. Yeah, that means they're going to do some crazy stuff. It gets into like the partying territory. I'm going to put this in B tier. The gender studies, they're likely to always play the victim and all that stupid stuff. So for that reason, I'm going to put this in A tier. I don't know if it's quite as bad as smoking, but depends on how hardcore it is. Gambling problem, not good. Has to be an A tier. It's not as bad as hard drugs. I will put this here. Uneducated. If it's zero education, no high school, anything, I mean, that's pretty big red flag. For this list, I'm going to assume uneducated means no post-secondary. I'm going to put this in C tier. I don't think education is an indicator of intelligence necessarily. I think this is a huge misconception. So I'm going to put it there. 10 plus body count. This one's tough. Long-term partner. It's pretty clear. S tier. Could be similar to in and out of relationships, but because it didn't specify the number, it's how do we really define this? So that's why this one's A tier, this one's S tier, but similar sort of idea. And if we're being completely honest, I'm actually gonna move this to the top of A tier. Now that I think about it. K-pop stan goes in the gamer girl category. Isn't that crazy? Subpar hygiene, same as ungroomed. I think it's worse than being ungroomed. So I'm gonna put this in A tier. Hygiene overweight. I think hygiene is even worse than being overweight. So I'll definitely put it there. Gold digger. I mean, every girl is going to want to extrapolate some value from her guy. Does that mean that every girl is a gold digger? Is it a spectrum? Probably, because at some point your wallet does matter, guys. Even if you're the most ideal guy on earth, you have to at least provide a bare bones something. So does that mean that every girl is a gold digger? I don't know. If we're talking about the more standard definition where it's a girl only gets with a guy because of money, like that's the exclusive reason. If we go with that, then obviously we're going to go into S tier. Disrespects animals. That is really, really weird and very non-feminine. So absolutely S tier. If a girl disrespects animals, I mean, what kind of girl is that, right? Girls are always the ones that care about cute things and all this. So if they're the ones that are very disrespectful to animals, you got to be a bit careful. Makes TikToks. Now, this is worse than just being a TikTok user. I'd put this in a similar category as Twitch streamer. A little bit probably lower down. But then again, it's sort of like Instagram now. So I guess it depends. This one's tough. Because it's not specifying follower counts or anything, I'm going to leave it in B tier, but it's not quite A tier. If it's a high following, it starts to get into the Twitch streamer A tier category. Content creator influencer. This is to me the same as Twitch streamer, very, very similar. Lots of attention, lots of competition there. Very easy for them to get an overinflated sense of value. Same thing. Feminist. This one's pretty funny. I mean, for me personally, it's S tier, but I do understand how it's very similar to gaslighting, gender studies, probably worse. Those two are very similar. I'm going to put it in A tier. Be very careful. Extreme left, same thing. Extreme right. Long-term relationship-wise, you're actually more likely to have success with extreme right than extreme left because extreme right believes in absolute order, religion, all these things. So honestly, not great either, but definitely better than extreme left for long-term sake. I'm going to put this in this category. Now that I think about it though, extreme right wing. Honestly, I'm going to change my mind on this. I was sort of thinking from a very general perspective, but I think in actual reality, the extreme right wing women that are very out there about their opinion on this is that same masculine characteristic of wanting to be opinionated and correct about something as being extreme left. So honestly, I'm actually going to change this and put this right behind extreme left. I really don't think it's much of a difference. If they're so hardcore about being extreme, it's unlikely they'll maintain a long-term relationship. Keep in mind, for reference, of course, someone like Candace Owens is not extreme right. I'm talking the absolute graph of extreme right. I'm not talking about the modern definition of what leftists think extreme right is. Keep that in mind. That's how I'm defining it. I'm talking about objective extreme right female. Vegan. Vegan's interesting. Definitely a delusional thing most of the time. It does go hand in hand with feminist, extreme right, extreme left, gender studies. I'm going to put it behind gender studies because at least vegan, there's an angle of, oh, I care about animals. Excessive drinking, same as this. They go hand in hand. Takes religion too seriously. This one's really annoying because even though you're not supposed to judge others as a Christian or a Muslim or whatever, when people take it too seriously, they inevitably end up doing exactly that. And they're constantly putting moral judgments onto you. But are they looking at themselves the same way? Most of the time, probably not. For that reason, takes religion too serious is really annoying to manage. However, because religion does praise and encourage long-term relationships, I can't deny that it's easier to be with a person long-term that takes religion too serious than doesn't take religion serious at all. For that reason, I'm definitely going to put this in C tier. Overly active on social media. It makes TikToks. Be aware. Bad at driving. Very good. The feminine, right? When girls are very feminine, a lot of times they're bad at driving. So I actually put this in D tier. Anger issues. Anger is a very masculine thing. Not very good. I'm going to put this in the same category as less than gaslighting. No, I should put it higher. Yeah, right there. A tier. Dirty shoes. I mean, unkept, same thing, but lower down. I'm gonna put this in B tier. Always wearing a hat or a beanie. It's not my ideal thing, but at the same time, it's not really gonna affect your long-term relationship necessarily that much. So I'm gonna put this in the same category as gamer girl, anime. Doesn't take responsibility. I mean, how many girls take responsibility? Genuinely. So if you care about this, you're in a whole lot of trouble. D tier. We'll put it C tier. Fine. Put it C tier. Unappreciative. This is very problematic. It will never be enough. No matter what you do, it'll never be enough. So this to me is an A tier, same category as disrespects waitresses or doesn't like when you're with friends, sort of in this range. Rock metal fan. Same thing. It goes into the anime thing. Goth girl, same thing. Probably a little bit worse than an anime weebtard. So I'm going to go into here. It's worse than overly quirky. There. Plays hard to get. Same thing as gaslighting. It's in that manipulation category. Be aware. Comes on too strong. It's one of those things, it's not as bad, but yes, you definitely have to be careful of this because she might be latching onto you for purposes outside of just liking you if they're jumping on so quick. You gotta be careful with this because sometimes they may really like you, right? So a little bit of discernment on this one. I'm gonna put this in B tier. Uses Snapchat. I mean, same as TikTok, really. Picky eater. Most girls are pretty picky eaters from what I've seen, but I mean, it's not really a deal breaker, to be honest with you. So I'm going to put this in C tier. Horse girl. These are all just types, right? I mean, it's really not that defining as people make it seem. So I'm going to put this sort of in this category. Probably not quite as bad as a gamer girl or K-pop. We'll put it right there. Tomboy. I mean, this is a girl that has some masculine tendencies, but usually they're pretty chill. Sort of on par with one of the guys, but not necessarily as bad. I'm going to kind of define this here as a type again. I'll probably put her here. Is that worse than a gamer girl? No. There. Hardcore football fan. Don't love it, but it doesn't come with the law. These ones aren't that deep, right? Once again, here, just some sort of preference they do. I'm going to put them in. It's probably worse than gamer girl, hardcore football fan. They're sort of bad for different reasons, but there. Cheated in the past. Once someone's done something, they're more likely to do it in the future. This is just the nature of things. But then again, what do you define as cheating? If she checked out and already had another guy that she was considering before she ended her relationship or a year into her relationship or whatever, is that cheating? Is just the act cheating? To me, I view the mental side of it equal to the act. Sure, the act is worse. I get that, but who cares if she does it or not? If she's already thinking about it, the response or the reality to the guy is the same. It's the same. Whether she does it or thinks about it should be the same to you. You should see it the same way because that means she doesn't like you anymore. That's the key there. So cheated in the past. I mean, she fell out of love with the guy. It shows a little bit of restraint by not doing it for sure. But if she broke up day one and then goes to the guy day two, is that really that different? I just don't see it as that different, guy. I know a lot of people disagree because they really care about some sort of social rules like, oh, well, we were dating yesterday, we broke up now, and I already have another guy. Somehow in their head that is not as bad, even though it's exactly the same. It's no difference, practically speaking. So for this one, I'm gonna put this in B. I will put this high in B. Guilt tripping. This is the same thing as gaslighting. Hiding the relationship, doesn't like you that much, be ready to get replaced. I'm gonna put this in S tier actually. Constantly makes you feel dumb, disrespect. This is in the S tier category. Downplaying your emotions, gaslighting. Same thing. Seeks validation. They're all going to seek validation on some level. It gets into the same category as showing off, but because it's more general and not as specific, it could be in a variety of ways. Doesn't need to be just sexual. So for that reason, put it right here. B tier. Needs reassurance. Same thing. All girls are going to need reassurance. So to put this even in B tier actually is too high. I'm going to put this in, I'll be honest, all women need reassurance. I don't even think it's a C tier. All girls are going to need some form of reassurance, guys. If you can't handle this, you're screwed. It's D tier. It's D tier for sure. Now, validation and reassurance is not the same. Reassurance, obviously. Do you love me? Classic. Seeking validation, it can take on a variety of different forms. And the problem category, obviously, is she's seeking validation from someone externally, another guy, right? But because it's not too specific, that's why it's B tier, but it could very easily be A tier. Hold you to double standard. Same thing as gaslighting, right? Same thing. All these manipulation tricks, shaming language, all this all falls under the same thing. Like some of these items are so similar that it's not even worth having them. But anyway, energy drinks. Same as coffee, probably a little bit worse. I'm gonna put it right above coffee. Stoner, weed addict, a full-blown addict. I have to put it under hard drugs as a partying category. It's not as bad, I guess, technically. It's not as bad as drinking, I guess, but it's in a similar category, so I will put it here. 24/7 on her phone, that's everybody. C tier. Clingy, there's honestly a lot worse problems than being clingy. She likes you enough, she'll be clingy. If a girl loves you a lot, man, they're always going to be clingy. So honestly, same as needs reassurance. They're all going to be clingy if they like you enough. And I know a lot of people are going to talk about the avoidant and all that stuff. Listen, man, they're not going to be avoidant when they really, really like you. When you're exactly the guy for them, they won't be avoidant. They will be clingy. Okay? So get that out of your head. Possessive, let's be honest. If they like you a lot, they will be possessive. This is just how it is. Put it in the same category. Parents track their location out of their control. I actually think it's a good thing, right? If their parents really care about her and making sure she stays out of trouble, yeah, it's a bit obsessive, but if anything, it makes her safer for you. So I'm going to put this in D tier. Eating disorder, pretty bad. We're getting into the realm of depression and stuff. So I'm going to put it very close to this. Frequently depressed. I think it's probably a little bit worse if you're at this point. So I'm going to put it a bit above. Impatient, not great, but end of the day, it's not a total deal breaker. I'm going to put this C tier. Overly defensive. Being overly defensive is pretty common. It's not like most people in general are very good at taking critique. And I think women might even be a little bit worse only because guys are forced into taking critique. Sports teams, whatnot, right? Girls are more emotional, so they're a little bit worse at being defensive, but this sort of comes with the territory. Can be very annoying to overcome in a long-term relationship, but not necessarily a full deal breaker either. So I'm going to put this in B tier. Drama queen, similar thing, but drama queens can maintain a long-term relationship. Just something that's annoying to deal with. I'll put it in low B tier. High maintenance. If a girl is very, very attractive, the chances it should be high maintenance are way higher. Be able to handle it. There are a lot of girls that are high maintenance, but maybe shouldn't be so high maintenance. So I think that's what it refers to. It's disproportional. But what does that mean, right? Compared to the ideal. The ideal girl, by that logic, should never want anything except just love, right? We obviously know that can't exist. So I feel like this one is tough. Every girl's going to require some level of maintenance, obviously, right? Now, what is defined as high maintenance? This is where it's complicated to define. I'm going to put this in B tier. Addicted to gym. There's way worse addictions than this. It gets into the vanity territory. I see it as a similar spectrum as Botox and stuff, but just something that's controllable. So definitely below. Now, we're not talking about going to the gym. We're talking about addicted to the gym, right? So just keep that in mind. Post gym pics on social media, seeking validation, but a more sexual version of it. So for that, I think this is much, much more particular. I'm actually going to put this right here. A tier, high A tier. All right, guys, that's the exhaustive list I went through. There's a lot of items there. Some of them are a little bit redundant, but doesn't matter. Hopefully you guys got some value out of this and understood what is a serious red flag and what is a less serious red flag. There's no perfect woman, guys. Every girl is going to have some quirk. Some quirks, though, are probably worth tolerating where others aren't. As I said at the beginning of this video, this list is subject to change. If you think I misplaced something, comment down below and tell me how I'm wrong. As always, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check the links in the description below.